so lucky to be living in peace, on Brazen Bull. In ancient Greece, an inventor named Perilos presented to the tyrant Phalaris of Acragas a grotesque work of art, a brazen bull the size of a real animal, hollow inside with a hatch set into its flank. Perilos promised the king it would be the perfect execution device. Lock a person in the bull's belly, light a fire beneath, and the metal would gradually heat until the bull became a living oven. The victim inside would be slowly roasted in the sealed cavity, screaming in agony. More chilling still, Perilos had tuned the bull's head with a system of acoustic tubes that would transform the victim's cries into the bellowing of a live bull. Smoke from the charred body would drift out through the nostrils like coils of incense, creating a spectacle as barbaric as it was hair-raising. Legend adds that when the hatch was opened, the victim's blackened bones would gleam like jade, kept by the tyrant as ornaments, a way to flaunt the achievement of the torture. Phalaris, the notoriously cruel tyrant, made the inventor taste his own creation. Perilos was tricked into stepping inside the brazen bull. The hatch slammed shut and the flames rose. His screams sounded exactly as he had described, resonant like a maddened bull's roar. Phalaris savored the horrific sound. Before Perilos could die, the king had the hatch opened and the man dragged out, only to hurl him from a cliff to finish the job as a vicious joke. Later, Phalaris himself is said to have died in the bull when a revolt toppled him, a ghastly end for one who had sown terror. The brazen bull was not merely an execution device, but a perverse audio-visual performance that projected a tyrant's power. To stand outside and hear the bull's bellow, to smell burning flesh, and to know that a human being inside was writhing, this was an experience that filled the crowd with utter dread. The victim suffered a dreadful death. Rising heat seared the skin, the lungs desiccated amid strangled screams, until breath finally failed in loneliness and horror. The bull's refined brutality showcases the cold inventiveness of the ancients, turning killing into a dark art. It also reflects the decadence of power, when a human life becomes a plaything, and another's pain a tune for a ruler's amusement. Today, many scholars debate whether the brazen bull was widely used or merely a legend, but the story endures as a chilling, cautionary tale about inhuman cruelty in human history. Two-Blood Eagle. Norse legend brings us to a terrifying execution ritual called the Blood Eagle. Unlike punishments meant for interrogation, the Blood Eagle was a ritual of retribution and sacrifice reserved for the Vikings' sworn enemies, typically kings or enemy leaders captured in battle. It was commonly staged as a public rite to display power. The victim was bound face down on a flat stone or a log. The executioner, often a renowned warrior, stood behind with a sharp sword or axe. The ritual began. He set the blade along the prisoner's spine and slashed a long cut from the nape down to the lower back, then made a matching cut on the opposite side of the spine. Blood poured out, staining the bare back deep red. Next, each rib was chopped free from the spine with the keen weapon. The chilling crack of breaking bones rang out as the rib cage was forced open. The executioner then pried the chest wide and pulled the still warm lungs up over the shattered ribs, shaping two vast, blood-soaked wings unfurling from the body. In legend, the dying lungs still quivered, making the blood wings tremble, the emblem of an eagle taking flight. In reality, researchers believe the victim likely died of shock or lost consciousness before any such movement could occur outside the body. Even so, the vision of those enormous, bloody wings spread across a prisoner's back has become a nightmarish symbol of Viking brutality. A victim of the Blood Eagle would almost certainly die in excruciating pain as soon as the ribs were broken. The sensation of flesh being torn and bones snapping, words can hardly capture it. According to the sagas, the unfortunate suffered a hell on earth, with physical and mental agony peaking until they could only beg for death to end the torment. Psychologically, if any awareness remained, the victim would plunge into absolute panic, pain-mad before the nervous system gave out. The ritual served both vengeance, often to settle a blood debt such as avenging a Viking leader's slain father, and sacrifice to Odin for victory. It also terrorized the enemy. Mere rumors of the Blood Eagle were enough to sap morale. Though many historians today argue the Blood Eagle may be embroidered legend, lacking direct archaeological proof, the fear it inspired was very real. The Blood Eagle lays bare the most ruthless face of Viking warrior culture. Revenge down to the bone, treating the torment of a foe's body as a way to uphold honor and intimidate. In Norse society, warriors believed that glorious death in battle won a place in Valhalla, while defeated foes deserve the most savage humiliations. Whether fact or myth, the Blood Eagle endures as a ghastly emblem of an age where blood and honor intertwined with every stroke of the blade, leaving a lasting horror in the memory of posterity. Lingchi. Let's go to Imperial China to witness a punishment known as the death by 1,000 cuts. Lingchi, commonly called slow slicing. Emerging around the 10th century, Lingchi was practiced in China for nearly 1,000 years, not officially abolished until 1905. The terrifying method also spread to Korea and Vietnam in earlier times. Only those convicted of the gravest crimes, high treason, regicide, parricide, mass murder, or grave sacrilege, were condemned to Lingchi. Its purpose was to make the offender suffer the utmost pain and humiliation before death, and to deter anyone from attempting similar crimes. The scene of a Lingchi execution was hell on earth. The prisoner was typically bound tightly to a post in a marketplace or execution ground, stripped to the waist for all to see. The executioner, nicknamed the meat cutter, the specialist who carried out Lingchi, stepped forward with a willow leaf-thin blade. A roll of the drum sounded and the first cut was made. Some accounts describe the executioner severing the victim's hands and feet first to prevent resistance. The condemned screamed in agony while soldiers kept the onlookers silent. Then the executioner began paring away small pieces of flesh. The nose, ears, lips, eyelids, disembowel. With each stroke, a flap of flesh fell and blood dyed the ground a deeper red. It is said that in some places the ordeal lasted up to 3 days, with thousands of cuts. Though this is debated, as a victim could bleed to death within hours if the cuts were too deep. More likely, a final, fatal blow, a thrust to the heart or decapitation, was reserved for the end, ensuring the prisoner endured enough pain before dying. After death, the body was beheaded and dismembered. The sliced-off pieces were displayed publicly, hung from posts, or laid on trays to warn the populace. This is the fate of rebels. Few images are more horrific. A living person cut to pieces, writhing in unspeakable pain and utter humiliation before the crowd. Physically, Lingchi was as excruciating a torture as one can imagine. From the stinging slice through skin to the burning agony as parts of the body were progressively removed. The heart raced, blood ebbed away, and death crept in slowly through overwhelming pain. Psychologically, terror and despair smothered the victim, dying by degrees while fully aware the body was being dismembered, under the gaze of hundreds. Many likely fainted or died of shock before the final stroke. Lingchi also inflicted post-mortem humiliation. In Confucian belief, one should be buried whole to return properly to the ancestors. To be carved to pieces meant no whole body, no peaceful passing, a punishment of both body and soul. Its brutality reflects a feudal ethos that prized deterrence above all. Rulers believed that the more public and savage the penalty, the more stable the realm under fear. It also reveals a society that valued order and loyalty to the point of annihilating traitors completely in life and beyond. Horrific as it was, Lingchi was once accepted as a necessary evil to uphold sovereign authority. To blunt the horror, the Qing at times had the condemned given opium before the ordeal, an ironic mercy amid an inhuman punishment. The abolition of Lingchi in 1905 marked a major step in human rights consciousness in East Asia, ending a millennium-long ritual of execution that remains a stain and a haunting in the historical memory. Author Judas Cradle. Come to medieval Europe, where we encounter a torture device that looks simple at first glance, yet makes the blood run cold. The Judas Cradle, a wooden apparatus shaped like a razor-sharp pyramid. This monstrous contrivance emerged during the Inquisition and is said to have been common in 16th century Europe, especially associated with Spain under ecclesiastical rule. The Judas chair was essentially a pyramidal spike mounted on a sturdy frame. Its apex, honed like a spear and pointing skyward, seemed innocuous, yet it was a waking nightmare for the unlucky. The procedure sounded simple but inflicted utter agony. The victim, often stripped, was suspended by rope or pulley directly above the spike. Their arms were bound behind them, their legs restrained. Their entire body hung there, waiting for its own weight to pull it down. Under the gaze of torturers and sometimes a curious crowd, the rope was slowly lowered. "Oh God!" A scream tore from the throat as the pyramid's point pierced the body. Typically, the spike entered the anus or the vagina, areas brutally sensitive, causing transcendent pain. By reflex, the body recoiled, but there was no escape. Every attempt to writhe away only drove the point deeper. To heighten the cruelty, the torturers might hold the victim hovering, the tip barely inserted, then jeer and threaten, demanding confessions or information. The fear of being dropped onto the spike sent many into blind panic, ready to confess to anything. If resistance continued, the victim would be released from higher up, the spike rending flesh, sometimes tearing the pelvic region. The hip bones and coccyx could shatter. Internal organs suffered grievous injury. Death might come after a few drops from internal trauma or blood loss, or, luckier still, the victim lingered in prolonged torment, only to die of infection later. Thus, the Judas Cradle was both savagely painful and profoundly humiliating. The victim was impaled through the private parts before onlookers, reduced to a grotesque spectacle for a fanatical crowd. The Judas Cradle reveals the ghastly ingenuity of medieval torturers. With nothing more than a sharpened post and a rope, they turned a victim's own body weight into the instrument of execution. The pain it inflicted wasn't instantaneous but meted out in increments, enough to keep the victim alive and suffering to the limit. Psychologically, the prisoner was driven into panic, shame, and despair. Many, under such torment, fell into delirium and madness before dying. Its barbarity reflects an era when religious fanaticism and absolutism sanctioned inhuman methods. It served as a tool to coerce confessions, true or false, embodying the dictum that torture someone enough, anyone will talk. The Judas Cradle reminds us that in history's darkest corners, humans engineered pain with chilling coolness, and in the name of warped ideals, like purifying heretics, justified crimes against the dignity of the human body. 5. Catherine Wheel. In the medieval arsenal of torture, the breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, was perhaps one of the most brutal and notorious methods of execution. It was nothing more than a large wooden wheel, like an ox cart wheel, but its purpose was not transport. It was to pulverize human bone and flesh. The punishment originated in antiquity but remained common across Europe throughout the Middle Ages and well into the 18th and 19th centuries. Many countries on the continent, especially France and Germany, used the wheel to execute those deemed the worst offenders, often robbers, murderers, or the incestuous, whom authorities believed deserved a publicly painful death. The spectacle of a wheel execution was enough to horrify anyone. The victim was typically bound spread-eagled on the ground, or lashed directly to the wheel laid flat. The executioner would take an iron bar or a sledgehammer, raise it high, and bring it down on the victim's limbs resting on the wheel. Bones splintered as arms and legs were smashed to pieces. The condemned might faint from the pain, but the executioner would douse them with water, or wait for them to come to, and then continue. Broken limbs were bent and threaded through the spokes, twisting the body around the wheel like a rag. The wheel, sometimes with the victim strapped across its face, was then hoisted upright on a stake and left exposed to the elements. Still alive now with dozens of fractures, the victim hung contorted and bleeding. Onlookers saw a mangled, bloodied figure dangling in the air, a sight that chilled them to the core. The unfortunate could agonize for hours, even days, until traumatic shock and dehydration claimed their life. During that time, crows and other birds might come to peck at the flesh of the helpless victim. This, too, was part of the penalty, to let them die slowly in pain and in terror. Sometimes, as an act of mercy, the judge permitted a final coup de grace, a decisive blow to the chest or abdomen, if enough suffering had already been inflicted. But in many cases, the condemned was left on the wheel until death. The corpse was then kept bound to the wheel and set up at a crossroads or the execution ground as a public warning, sometimes for weeks. People believed that a body left exposed like this could not find peace. Like one crucified, its soul could not pass to the next world, a post-mortem punishment for grievous crime. With the Catherine wheel, physical pain surely exceeded the limits of human endurance. Dozens of bones breaking at once, pain sharp enough to drive one mad, then being hoisted and left to thirst while birds picked at your flesh. It is the ultimate nightmare. Many victims died in panic and solitude, their bodies put on display for public gawking even after death. A total annihilation of dignity. Socially, the wheel embodied the iron logic of medieval punishment, the belief that the horrors visited upon a few would deter the crimes of many. Savage cruelty was normalized as part of law. At the same time, it exposed the crowd's latent bloodlust. Public executions could devolve into perverse entertainment, feeding curiosity and thirst for blood. The wheel is also tied to the legend of Saint Catherine, said to have been martyred upon it, with the tale that the wheel shattered at her touch. That saintly story does nothing to soften the method's monstrosity. If anything, it made the device more famous under the name Catherine wheel. In the end, as humanity progressed, such wheels of death were abolished and left as ghastly emblems of the past. Yet the lesson of cruelty made ordinary by the wheel endures. It warns us that law without humanity can turn justice into atrocity. 6. Mouse. Among humanity's primal fears, few are more nightmarish than being eaten alive by animals. And yet people once exploited that very terror to torture one another, most infamously with rat torture. It sounds unbelievable, but from Renaissance Europe to 20th century dictatorships, starving rats were used as instruments of torment in ways that are difficult to fathom. This method is ingenious in a terrifyingly simple way. The victim was stripped and tightly bound on their back to a table or floor, unable to move. The torturers then placed a metal pot over the victim's bare abdomen, with several live rats trapped inside. The rim of the pot was clamped hard against the skin so the rats couldn't escape the way they came. At first, the victim felt only cold claws and heard panicked squeaks in the darkness under the pot. Then the real torture began. The executioner heated the pot's base with flame or hot coals. Metal conducts heat quickly. Inside, the rats frenzied as the heat rose. Their instinct to survive drove them to find an exit. But the fire blocked the way above. The only path was to dig through the one soft barrier available, the victim's belly. As incredible as it sounds, accounts describe rats in their panic, gnawing through skin and burrowing into the abdominal cavity to escape the heat. A rat's teeth and claws can pierce flesh with frightening speed when pushed to extremes. When the pot was finally lifted, a blood-soaked crater often remained. Rats, slick with gore, chewing at exposed viscera. The victim died in unspeakable agony, their organs savaged piece by piece. Even if the torturer stopped early, the mere sensation of rats biting and crawling inside one's body could drive a person mad. Shock alone could be fatal. This grotesque method did occur in history. The earliest recorded use dates to the 16th century during the Dutch Revolt, when a Dutch commander named Diederik Sonoy used rat torture to extract confessions from Spanish prisoners. He covered a captive's abdomen with a rat-filled bowl and heated it until the rats gnawed through to the bowels. Later, rat torture reappeared under South American dictatorships in the 20th century. In Pinochet's Chile, secret police devised a horrifying variant nicknamed the rectoscope. They inserted a live rat in a tube and forced it into the victim's rectum or vagina. The biting and clawing inside the body inflicted pain and humiliation beyond words, leaving survivors, if they survived, permanently traumatized in body and mind. Human rights organizations such as Amnesty International documented prisoners being confined in dark rooms with hundreds of rats as psychological torture in Brazil and Argentina as well. For the victim, rat torture combines extreme physical pain with overwhelming psychological horror. The agony of organs being gnawed is unimaginable, but the primal terror is perhaps the most devastating. The knowledge that filthy creatures are eating you alive from within can shatter the mind. Many would die of heart attack or neurogenic shock at the first bites. So terrifying is the threat that simply menacing a prisoner with this method often suffice to make them confess. Rat torture exposes the cruelty humans are capable of, exploiting even animal panic to serve human brutality. It reflects an era and regimes in which human life was cheap and rulers spared no atrocity to achieve their ends. The image of rats devouring living flesh stands as a stark emblem of ultimate savagery, reminding us that without humane laws and moral restraint, humans can debase one another beyond the ferocity of beasts.